Hey, what is up, everybody? So today I want to touch on Maxx Crosby once again and really break down if trading for Maxx Crosby is something the Green Bay Packers should actually contemplate doing. I think if we look at this Packers team this year, there's no doubt the Packers pass rush was one of the weak spots of this Packers team. And I think looking ahead, if this team really wants to compete for a Super Bowl and become a team that can really dictate things against other offenses, against other top-tier quarterbacks, the area where there really needs to be improvement is this Packers pass rush. And I think Jeff Hafley, given what he had, the players he had, the injury to Jair Alexander, coached up one of the best possible seasons that I think we could have seen when the Packers decided to bring him in as the new defensive coordinator. And the one weak spot consistently was the Packers pass rush that, according to NFL Pro, finished as the 20th unit in QB pressure percentage. And last year, when we look at the Packers cap space situation, they actually had the second most cap space going to a defensive line in the NFL in 2024. Most of that did have to do with Kenny Clark, who had a $26 million cap hit. And considering Kenny Clark just didn't really have a great 2024, to have to, spend $26 million on the cap for one player and then have him decline like he did in the 2024 season, that's obviously not something that you really want to see. And when we look at Kenny Clark, he went from 10 sacks in 2023 to only 1 sack in 2024. And so all in all, the Packers pass rush was a big letdown in 2024. And I think one of the biggest issues has been Lucas Van Ness underperforming. When you spend a first-round pick on a guy like Lucas Van Ness, as the Packers did, you would hope that in year two you would start to see some top-tier production when you spend, top-tier draft capital on an edge rusher. And the reality is the Packers have not gotten top-tier production out of Lucas Van Ness. And Brenton Cox actually played much better than Van Ness, undrafted player. He had the same amount of sacks as Lucas Van Ness and 2 less pressures on 271 less snaps. And so I'm not saying here that Van Ness is never going to reach his potential, but so far he has not reached it, and I am very concerned considering he's already played 2 NFL seasons. And so now that sort of sets the stage for where the Packers are and really what the Packers could do to bolster this unit. And I think Maxx Crosby is a very interesting option. And when you have a top-tier player on a bottom-tier team that just has not been good and I think has a lot to do to become a really solid unit, it's in these kind of situations where trading for a player of this caliber would make sense. I think that if the Raiders were a top-tier team, they probably wouldn't give away one of their best players. And when we do look at their owner, Mark Davis, I think it was around October last year, somewhere around there, he did say that Raiders are not going to trade Maxx Crosby, but I think we see things can change pretty quickly, organizations, especially with a team like the Raiders that just got Pete Carroll as their head coach. There is no doubt the Raiders desperately need a quarterback if they really want to find success. And I think if you're the Raiders, you have to be at least questioning whether you want to trade Maxx Crosby because you're going to get a good amount of draft capital. And I think that trying to build a more full team instead of maybe having one elite pass rusher is something that I think the Raiders at least are going to consider. And so I came across an interesting trade idea. Some of you may have seen it as well about a Maxx Crosby trade with Green Bay. Just an idea from the 33rd team. And this was the trade pitch. The Packers receive Maxx Crosby, and the Packers send a 2025 second-round pick and a 2026 third-round pick. And when I saw that, my first thought is if that was something the Raiders offered, the Packers should do it without even thinking. Don't even process it. Don't think about it. Make the trade right away. Because in my mind, I think that Maxx Crosby should at least warrant 1 first-round pick. I was even thinking something like a first and a second wouldn't be that crazy for a guy of Maxx Crosby's caliber. And so if the Raiders were actually going to trade him for a second and third, I say do it. Gutekunst, just do it. But I really don't think that's the kind of trade that would go down if Maxx Crosby was traded for, just because of the kind of player he is. And so when we do look at Maxx Crosby's production in 2024, It wasn't as good as his previous 2 seasons, but I think the biggest reason was the ankle injury he was dealing with, and he made it clear that he'd been playing through a high ankle sprain for a while, and then he ended up getting surgery, which is why he only played 12 games in 2024. And so I think that's a big reason. He was playing through a pretty serious injury, and I think that's why his production dipped off. And when we look at his production in 2024, comparing it to Rashawn Gary, they're honestly very similar. Rashawn Gary, according to PFF, this is among all defensive linemen, interior rusher, defensive linemen, and edge rushers. Rashawn Gary was 50th in win percentage at 12.2%. Maxx Crosby was 43rd in win percentage at 12.7%. Rashawn Gary had about 40 less snaps, but he had 1 more sack than Maxx Crosby, 9 sacks versus Maxx Crosby's 8 sacks. And so if you were just basing it off of 2024, he's not that different of a player from Rashawn Gary in 2024. But I do think that when you look at his previous time playing, 2022, 2023, he was one of the most effective pass rushers. He had 15 sacks in both years per PFF, and he is a guy that can play a massive amount of snaps. Rashawn Gary has never played the amount of snaps that Maxx Crosby has played. And in back-to-back years, Crosby in 2022 and 2023 played over 1,000 snaps. And so I think that if you trade for Maxx Crosby, I would be expecting to see with a fully healthy Maxx Crosby, the guy that we saw produce in 2022 and 2023. And I think that this is the kind of move that the Packers should make. I wouldn't be opposed to trading a 2025 first-round pick, 2026 second-round pick. I think that with where the Packers are right now, with the cap space they currently have, the best position they've been in a while, with the obvious need at edge rusher, I think this is something that you should really consider. And I think for years we saw Brian Gutekunst trading away players, trading away Aaron Rodgers, getting draft capital, trading away Devontae Adams, getting draft capital. But now this team, I think, is really ready to compete. And you could even hear it in Brian Gutekunst's press conferences that he talked about the sense of urgency needs to be basically increased. And with the way he's been talking, I think something like this is something that could happen. Is it going to happen? I don't know. Will the Raiders really consider giving him up? I don't know. I assume other teams would also be in the bidding for trading for Maxx Crosby. But this is something that if tomorrow you told me the Packers traded for Crosby, what would this outlook be for this team? I would be that much more confident in what this team could be because you get a insanely productive pass rusher, someone that is going to, greatly change what your defense can do. And I think corner is a need as well, but I do think edge rusher is even more important. And when you have really good edge rushers, that makes it easier for cornerbacks when you're getting to the quarterback as fast as some of these, top tier guys can get to the quarterback. And when we look at the cap hit as well, per Ken Ingles on X, who covers the Packers salary cap, it would be a $22,888,000 cap hit for the Packers in 2024. And currently, according to Over the Cap, the Packers do have $40.2 million of cap space. So they have the cap space right now. I think they would have to rework his deal a little bit because he does seemingly want more guaranteed money because right now he doesn't really have any guaranteed money left. That's what he said. I have no guaranteed money left. So that's something that may have to be figured out. But from a player standpoint and even giving away draft capital, I think this is something the Packers should greatly consider if the Raiders are willing to do it. But I'll be curious to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. That's all for today, and I'll see you guys next time.